Hey, it's Tansel, and I'm in Sydney doing some presentations around memory and learning and procrastination and all that sort of cool stuff. And I thought, why not talk about one of the talks that I gave, which is how to learn anything really, really fast. And, this is coming from my book, How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours, but I've tweaked a few things. So hopefully you can grab something exciting from it and take your learning to the next level. So let's go. How am I qualified to talk about this particular topic? Well, as a memory champion, what I've done is I've used these techniques that I've won in competitions, techniques that I've used to break memory records to implement into learning. And what sort of helped me was understanding how memory works. And you don't have to memorize everything. The key point here is that in order to learn something, you need to be able to connect the dots. You need to be able to comprehend. You need to be able to follow patterns. And if you can do that, majority of the learning, and whatever is left, that's what you use for memorization. And guess what? Probably about 5-10% is memorization. Don't believe me? Let's have a look at what we can do. So let's look at some of the steps on how to learn a lot quicker. So when I talk about learning fast, it's not necessarily just about speed, right? Because you can learn something fast, but forget it, or it's just not that great in terms of recall, retention, all that sort of stuff. What we want to be able to do is we want to have a system in place so that when we are learning something, that it's easy to do and it's streamlined, so we don't have to always put energy into learning, and that we can actually remember stuff from it. Right? Because that's what learning is. You want to be able to incorporate what you've taken on board into your head and use it in your everyday life if need be, right? Or if you don't use it for a while, remember it when you need to use it. Right? That's the key point. I'm looking at efficiency, right? Speed and effectiveness, which is, in this case, recall, retention, remembering, right? Comprehension, all that stuff. So how do we do that? I've broken it down in 7 steps. Now, I've got 7 steps in my book, How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours, but these are tweaked. And the reason why I've tweaked them, because this, I believe, is the order. Once you get this order, you're more likely to be effective as a learner, because we're always learning. I'm always tweaking things. What I've written years ago may not apply now, right? And things are always evolving. And that's what I love about the memory game, I guess, is that you're always learning, always looking at new things. So hopefully you can take out something new. I've done videos like this before, but this is, something that I've worked on for a very long time, and hopefully you can take something out of it. So let's go. A lot of things will be similar, but I want to go through that process anyway. So here we go. So the first step is, if you're learning something, right? Let's say whether it's a new language or for a particular topic you're studying or a subject at school, what you want to do is you want to gather your resources, right? All your materials. That just means that if you have any textbooks, if you have any online materials, if there's anything you need to print out, go do all of that. Have everything laid out in front of you. Don't just assume, hey, I've got these in these folders, I've got this in my bag. Just get everything out in front of you and look at what you've got to play with. That's the first step. Gather all your resources and materials. Once you've done that, the next step is to organize those materials. Now, what do we mean by organizing? Is it just, putting things together and off you go? Not necessarily. Organizing means what goes together. So are there particular categories that go together? Are you setting particular topics connected to each other? What I generally do is I create a mind map. Right? If you don't know what a mind map is, it's essentially a concept mapping tool that creates a hierarchy, a structure where information goes. And I've got a few mind mapping videos on my channel. So, go watch them because they're really valuable, and you can do them using online software as well, which is so cool. So give that a crack. So you can mind map and organize your information. So what you can do is, let's say you've got essays to read, or let's say you've got assignments to do. You can sort of park them somewhere, and, your readings, here they are. So once you organize all that information, and then information is in particular topics or week by week, or, you've got some sort of a structure, then what you can do is you can start to look at all those resources, right? So what do I mean by looking? Looking is essentially following the pattern, connecting the dots. I guess that's step 3, connecting the dots. So connecting the dots is all about following the pattern. So if you've got week 1, it's talking about introduction to blah, 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 blah. Okay. Week 2 is getting into deeper on a particular subject. You don't want to have them in the same branches. You want to keep them separate and then see where the pattern goes, because, week 1 introduction might be short, but then the second one might be a lot longer. So that's what you're doing. You're following the pattern. And once you follow the pattern, remember, it's not just a heading. You've got subheadings under those headings as well. So you can understand what's involved in each of those branches. So mind map, you don't even have to mind map, but it's a really good tool to do it, right? You can take your notes, but make sure that your note taking is structured in a way you understand what's underneath each one. So once you've connected the dots and you visualize where everything goes, that gives you a fairly good understanding of where everything fits. Have you memorized everything? Have you understood everything? Probably not, right? So this is where the next stage comes in, is you develop a memorization strategy. Now, are you going to memorize everything? No, right? The whole idea isn't to memorize everything. The whole idea is to make sure that whatever you don't know or whatever you've forgotten, maybe memorize that, because that makes it easier then. Because if you memorize that and you know everything else, guess what? You're going to know everything. That's the key to be able to get all that knowledge, right? So create a memorization strategy and then you memorize. What do I mean by memorization strategy? What technique are you going to use? Have the strategy, implement the strategy, memorize, right? And again, you don't have to memorize the whole thing. That's why it's step 5. You don't even get to memorization at the start, because generally when we start learning, what do? We're reading, we're trying to remember, we're trying to understand, we're trying to comprehend, we're trying to reflect, we're trying to study, we're trying to question, we're doing all those things. But in reality, if we just break those steps down, we don't have to memorize till right at the very end. And therefore, we've already understood most of the information that we're dealing with. So that's the key. The key is to understand and comprehend and use the visual processes to connect the dots. Once you've connected, part of the dots, then you can memorize and solidify that information. After you've memorized, that's when you go and do a review. And what do I mean by review is you can go and not repeat all that information, because the last thing you want is rote learning, right? You don't want to repeat. You want to review and visualize that story that you've created. What do I mean by story? Review the dots that you've connected. So if you're looking at your mind map, look at the patterns again and see what you understand from it. Again, it's all about your understanding. If you can connect the dots in your head on what you visualize for that content, then it's so much easier. It's like, imagine a whiteboard and I drew, random dots and I asked you how many dots would there be? You'd only be guessing. But if I did it 10 by 10 and filled them all evenly, you'd say that's 100. That's what I mean by organized information. After you've reviewed all your content, then the last thing to do is obviously test yourself, because you want to make sure that you've learned. There's the 7 steps, right? You want to make sure that you gather your resources, you organize it, you visualize, connect the dots, create a memorization strategy, memorize, review, test. There you go. So any questions, feel free to comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.